recorded. There you go. We invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can tell us your name, where you're joining from, any institution you're representing, or something you're looking forward to this summer. We're very eager to hear about. I also remind you that closed captioning and transcription is available for this free webinar, and you can enable that through the Zoom features. We also invite you to drop any questions you have throughout this webinar in the chat. We have a dedicated Q&A section toward the end of the webinar where we hope to address all of your various inquiries about AI. A little bit about the Rebus Foundation and our facilitators. We are the Rebus Foundation, a registered charity with the mission of forging new avenues for learning and open publishing. We work across borders to deliver professional development programs and resources for low to no costs, such as our signature Open Publishing Project Certificate, this free webinar series, and our upcoming Supplemental Materials Development Certificate. This webinar will be hosted by Amber Hoy. Amber leads programs at the Rebus Foundation, where her work in instructional design and project management supports equitable access to open education. With a master's in educational technology and a graduate certificate in online teaching and adult learners from Boise State University, she has facilitated the creation of over 15 open textbooks, including Français Inclusif, which was a finalist for the Open Education Award in 2023, and over 900 ancillary resources through the Pathways Project. Amber is also a certified Creative Commons and has completed an OER and fair use cohort. She is passionate about amplifying diverse voices and fostering experiential learning for all. Amber, welcome to the stage, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Spencer. And hello to everyone. I'm really excited to introduce you to today's facilitators. We have two Rebus alumni here with us today. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce them and let them jump in and say hi as well. First, we have Ariful Shanil. And Ariful is a dedicated learning designer with a proven track record in diverse academic and nonprofit organizations, driving technology-driven innovation. Currently, he serves as an instructional designer at the Center at the University of Manitoba, where he is focusing on the Manitoba Flexible Learning Hub, also known as the MB Hub. His role contributes to the furtherance of the online learning ecosystem in Manitoba through that hub, and he is a passionate advocate for open education in post-secondary institutions. He is also an enthusiastic learner of generative AI, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your perspectives today, Ariful. And he's done a lot of work to integrate it into teaching and learning while also exploring the ethical and responsive application. And he recently graduated from the 2024 cohort in January, the January 2024 cohort, I should say, for the Open Publishing Certificate, which we hold 2 to 3 times a year. So welcome, Ariful.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm also going to introduce you to Natasha Whitton. Natasha serves as an associate professor in the Department of English and Humanities at Baton Rouge Community College. She's an interdisciplinary scholar, and she has degrees in biology, literature, and history. Her first experience writing textbooks was in the area of composition, and she has also collaborated on several custom writing handbooks and combined reader and rhetorics with faculty. More recently, she worked on a team to create both an open textbook and course for Western civilization, particularly for dual enrollment students. In addition to be committed to OER as a tool to increase the accessibility of education, she has served as a faculty fellow for the Great Questions Foundation and for an NEH Institute on Willa Cather. She was awarded a fellowship in 2025 through Viva and ISKME to explore using AI with OER. Welcome, Natasha, and I'm so excited to learn more about your perspectives on AI as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay, so you can jump to the next slide if you'd like to. Okay, and before we get started, I'd love to take a moment to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Kwikwatlam people, or the Kwikwatlam First Nation. And I'm so grateful to the Kwikwatlam people who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. And if you haven't, I encourage you to visit a website like nativeland.ca, which will tell you more about the Indigenous lands where you reside. Okay. And Spencer, actually, I'll have you wait to do the animation on this one, because before I share that, I would love to do what I call a little bit of a waterfall to get us thinking and reflecting today. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to ask you one question at a time, and you can use chat for this. And what I'll have you do is wait to submit your answer. So I don't know if any of you have done these waterfalls in Zoom before, but they're kind of fun. And this one's just going to get us thinking about AI use a little bit. So what AI tools have you used or heard of? Go ahead and type them up, and then I'll give you a minute to hit enter, and then we can share them. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Just think of some of the ones that come to mind. All right, and go ahead and hit enter. Some of you were anxious. You beat me even to go. Awesome. Okay. And thinking specifically about OER, if you'd like, or more generally, we're going to do the same thing. So put your answer in your chat box, but wait to share. What tasks can you use AI for, or more specifically, generative AI? So I'll give you a second to put that in chat. All right, and go ahead and share. Awesome. Brainstorming, creating summaries, creating images, removing distracting content, all kinds of things in here. And then this is the last question that I have for you, and it's related to this slide. What sorts of jobs do you think might be impacted? Same thing, put your answer in the box. And I'll give you about 10 seconds, and then I'll ask you to share. Okay, go ahead and share. I was expecting some almost all jobs or all responses, but this is great. Radiology, authoring and editing, administrative, teaching. Yeah. Okay, so you can go ahead and click the animations if you'd like to. So this is according to a website called There's an AI for That. And as of today, there are 35,542 AI tools that can be used for 13,636 tasks and 4,999 jobs have been impacted. But I would agree with a lot of you who said almost all jobs, because I think in many ways, even if we're not actively using the tool in our current roles, we're working with other people who might, and so it sort of has a trickle-down effect to all of us. Okay, all right, Spencer, next slide. Okay. And so with all these AI tools becoming more and more predominant in our daily lives, I think it's worth pausing to consider how they might help or perhaps hinder our work in open education. So that's the goal for today's webinar, is to reflect on these ideas. And we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about how you might use AI for creating open educational materials or in your instruction. Think a little bit about some of the ethical considerations, environmental impacts, and copyright implications. And then we'll spend quite some time with Ariful and Natasha, really getting to learn from them and hear about how they've used it in the classroom or in instructional design and some of their reflections along the way. And we'll save plenty of time for question and answers. So if you want to, make sure you just put your questions in chat so we don't lose them. But we'll save those for the end, and we have, like I said, a nice chunk of time dedicated for that. Okay, next slide. So I wish I could come to you and say, yes, you should definitely use AI, or no, you shouldn't use AI. But I think when it comes to leveraging generative AI content in OER content creation, it really depends. There's not a right or a wrong answer. Instead, it's worth considering what tasks might align with your goals for your project as well as your values, right? So there's sort of this marriage. I like this illustration, right? There's our goals, there's our dreams, there's the knowledge, but then there's also our heart, our values. And sometimes it might make sense from a knowledge perspective, but maybe it's not going to align with our values or vice versa, right? So things that we'll be reflecting on today. Okay, next slide. So when you think about leveraging AI in OER content, it might be helpful to consider some questions like this. And I'm sure Natasha and Ariful will have maybe some other questions or some other ideas to consider when we chat. But I wanted to share 3 questions just for food for thought for you today that could sway you either way. And again, I think it's a case-by-case basis. It's not a black or white rule. So by using AI, could you perhaps simplify, simplify your life and do some more simple administrative tasks that could free you up to work on the heavy load or the more creative tasks that you want to do in your OER, right? So again, I was joking with the group today, but I used AI to help alphabetize my citations, right? I could have done that. I know how to alphabetize things, but it freed me up to do some other things like add some illustrations to the slide deck. What localized information or perspectives might be missing from content generated by AI? And if you're going to use AI, how will you address this, right? So this is something that we'll talk a little bit more on the ethical consideration slide. But when AI content is generated, it's going to really follow a dominant narrative. And how do we make sure that more marginalized perspectives or even localized information that is specific to your classroom, your city, your state, or even your country, for example, that information is tailored for your students, right? And then one thing that I'm thinking about a lot lately too is before using AI to create something, it's really easy just to go out to Claude or ChatGPT or any of these tools and just make something. But has someone already done some of the legwork for you? I think sometimes with AI, we forget that we have this wonderful ecosystem of the 5 Rs and the ability to revise and remix content. And so I challenge all of us to remember that, maybe I could go find an outline or I could go find an activity, but don't forget about the wonderful repositories that we have access to. And maybe there's something there that you might be able to use that is better than you expected. Okay, next slide. So how can generative AI support your content creation? We have a wonderful handout that Spencer worked on. It's going to dive into these roles a little bit deeper, but I want to just preview these with you. So we have research, outline, editing, tutoring, advising, grading, activating, summarizing, interpreting. And if you can think of other roles, please feel free to pop those in chat. What I thought we could do today, though, so we could have plenty of time for conversation, is to just spotlight 3 of these roles and give you some ideas on how your OER content creation might be supported by generative AI. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay. So one of the challenges I think that we face when we're going to create some sort of OER, whether it be a textbook or maybe we're working on a case study or a set of handouts, is finding the resources that are going to be pertinent to our discipline and instruction. I know that many of us feel like we're going down a rabbit hole when we're looking for information, and especially when it comes to perhaps reading journal articles, that can be a really time-intensive process. So one thing that I really think is valuable for us in the open education community is to consider using some tools like Elicit, for example, where we can identify potential searches by searching millions of articles and summarizing the relevant content. If you've used Elicit before in the chat, go ahead and pop a hand up or a thumbs up or something like that. I'd love to see if folks have used this tool, but something like that can be really great for us to get a leg up in terms of the content we want to use, right? And then we can go out and we can read those summaries, and then we can go out to those articles and then choose the information that we want to use. I was joking about alphabetizing, but it's a real thing, right? Like generating citations and bibliographies. There's lots of wonderful tools out there that can help us with that, or to keep track too, as OER creators. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of all the different sources that we've used, and this Logically tool is a great one for that because you can add tags and keywords, but then also generate a bibliography at the end. And then Lit Maps is another fun tool that you might check out. And this one allows you to look at different literature and find the relationships between different articles, or studies, but it's done in a way that is very visual and very engaging. And this can be a great way to sort of jumpstart your OER content creation and think about the content that you want to reference or include. And by the way, we will share all of these slides with you too that have hyperlinks so you can check out the resources at the end. Um, Another challenge that we might face is just creating an overall structure for our content. So maybe you've taught a class for, I don't know, 6 semesters, and you've generated like a lot of different handouts and content and readings, and you're just wondering what's the best way for me to maybe turn this into an openly licensed publication. Well, with AI, you could give it all your teaching materials, you could give it a summary, whatever you feel comfortable with, but it can help you to provide a list of chapter sections or perhaps a list of table of contents. When it comes to learning outcomes too, it can really help us to align things to Bloom's taxonomy and make sure that we're also challenging higher levels of thinking. Sometimes it's really easy to get those I'm visually thinking of Bloom's taxonomy, right? But those first few levels, right? But things like synthesize or research or create are more challenging. And so we can make sure that we're really stretching our students. And then we can also use AI to help us just to organize materials, whether that be a presentation outline, whether that be saying, hey, give me some suggestions for modules, or I have all this content and I teach 3 times a week. How might I break this up into a way that is a good pace for my students? So that's a really creative way that you can kind of take the content you already have, but find new ways to present it or to organize it. And another challenge that we might have is just if you've been teaching for a while or if you've been creating instructional materials for a while, sometimes you just sort of feel like you hit a wall in terms of ideas. I know Spencer and I have been working on a course for the past few months, and thinking about new activities is sometimes hard, right? We have the activities that we sort of love and they're our bread and butter. But using AI to get some ideas for how you might provide more variety or provide more clarity in your instructions can be a really great idea. There's also tons of prompt libraries out there where you can find templates for different types of activities that are based on either like your discipline or your level of instruction. And I also think that AI can really be helpful for us to put on different caps, if you will, for all kinds of different students, right? Multilingual students, a student who is maybe more advanced or is more at a novice level, and think about how that content might be received and how we can maybe also do a little bit of differentiation with the content to fit different learning styles or just experience. And just as important, I think it's worth pausing to think about what roles can't AI fill. Okay. So I had an opportunity to attend a wonderful webinar by John Warner a few weeks ago, and it was reflecting on this idea of the value of human writing in the age of AI. And it really got me thinking a lot about what are the things that me as a human, uniquely me, Amber, can bring to the table that AI can't. And one of the things that AI really can't do is it can't have experiences, right? It can't have reflection. And there's so much in our learning journey that is based on reflection, right? It can't do metacognition or thinking about thinking, right? These big picture things, these abstract concepts are quite difficult for AI, right? It's not John explained it as AI isn't intelligence, but it's automation. And I think that's a really good way of framing it and thinking about it for OER creation. And then it really can't do things like this, where we all sit around a table and we do this idea exploration and we build off one another organically and we sort of thrive and we debate and we have arguments, and it's one-sided, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that we as humans bring to the table that can't be replaced, at least for now. I could be convinced otherwise, but at least for now, that that human experience that we need to make sure that's captured. And I think especially when it comes to creating openly licensed publications, this reflection and the idea exploration and the metacognition, those are some of the richest parts of our books, right? Where we're highlighting different perspectives, where we're localizing our content, where we're reflecting, and we're not only as instructors we're reflecting, but we're inviting our students to also partake in that activity as well. Okay. Yeah. So your lived experiences, your knowledge, and your perspectives matter. And so what I'd like for you to consider when it comes to using AI in your OER creation is to really think about how it might automate processes and let you focus on you as a subject matter expert so that you can create the new content and use it as a tool, as an assistant. But that's really its strength. Your experiences and your knowledge are things that are irreplaceable. And I love this quote from John Warner again too here. He says that every human is a unique intelligence. Developing a unique intelligence is a work of teaching and learning, and honoring that is the highest calling of a teacher. Okay. So we'll spend a couple minutes here on ethical considerations and environmental concerns, and then we'll jump into some conversation with Natasha and Ariful to learn more about their perspectives and experiences. But just again, these are all very high level overviews of some of the things, but food for thought for you, so to help inform your decisions. And I think one of the most important things is just to remember that AI or generative AI is going to produce a lot of inaccurate, misleading, and unethical information. Okay. And it is our job to make sure that we go back and not only look for those, but also to think about harmful prejudice or biases that might be present in the text and really work to counter that. There's also this idea too that there's a lot of adaptive learning platforms that are based on AI, and that may not come in as much with OER creation, but it's also food for thought that it really can ignore contextual factors that influence student engagement, right? Why is the student not performing, right? AI can't ask those questions. Only we as instructors or administrators can ask those questions to students to learn more about why they might be struggling, or maybe they weren't struggling at all, but they downloaded the book instead of reading it online because they prefer to print out the book and have it on paper, right? I've seen that before too, where it's like analytics and press books and how many page views, and some students are just like, well, I just downloaded the book. I wanted to read it offline, or I wanted to read it on paper, and they were reading the book. It didn't mean they weren't reading the book, but the analytics thought that they weren't. So I think it's worth thinking about some of these adaptive tools as well. And then I know we have some questions for Ariful and Natasha about this, but there's a lot of AI tools that are pay to play, and that can really exacerbate the digital divide. So some of us are lucky to work at institutions where AI tools are provided the full level and everyone has sort of equal access. And then there are other institutions who don't have the budget to provide these tools to students. And so the students who can pay for some of the faster or newer models of generative AI are really at an advantage. So food for thought there. Okay. All right, Spencer, I think we'll go ahead and jump past the environmental impact so I can just briefly talk about the tassel. So I think one thing that's important to know is that copyright in the US and in Europe is works are only eligible if they're human created. And so at this moment in time, May 2025, the AI works are all considered to be in the public domain, and that might change in the future. So you can apply Creative Commons license to works that include AI, but you can only put that license really on work that is the human authored portion, right? The other stuff is sort of in the public domain. And so what I'd like to propose with you is a strategy to help people who might want to revise and remix content by doing something called Tassel Up. And the idea is that you're really familiar with Tassel by now. We do that with our Creative Commons attributions or any type of attribution that we do, right? So it's title, author, source, and license. And I would encourage you to add 2 letters to your practice if you're including AI-generated content. And there is sort of a line in the sand. At what point do you decide to provide an attribution? And that is right now, I think, is something that you have to decide individually. Is Grammarly worth using a tassel up attribution? I'm not sure, right? It's more of a tool, but if you did generate like an image, for example, a chart, if you were to do a reading or an activity, maybe that's something that's more worthy of this type of attribution. And the up stands for usage and prompt. And the idea behind that is a moment of reflection to think a little bit about why you selected this particular tool and how was the use of AI beneficial in creating it. Okay, you probably could have created it on your own. Why did you choose to use AI and why specifically that tool? Was there something that another person might know about? And then I also think it's worthy to think about the prompt and help other people to replicate or to maybe remix the work that you've done. So that's another thing we can do in terms of transparency. And sometimes it's not going to fit into the textbook, right? So I've linked out to it into like a Google Doc, for example, but providing the prompt can be really helpful for folks to try to replicate or again, remix what you did. So tassel up is something that is a great way to help other people see, disclose that you used generative AI, but also help them to reflect on why you used it and maybe try to replicate the recipe. Great. So with that, I'd love to invite Natasha and Ariful to unmute, and we'll jump into some facilitator discussion. And I think, Ariful, you're going to start us out. So if you think back to that slide with all of the people and the different roles, Natasha and Ariful, what roles have generative AI played in your creation as an instructor or instructional designer? And what did you appreciate about the role? And what were some of the challenges that you faced? So we'll go ahead and start with you, Ariful.
Thank you, Amber, for your wonderful and insightful presentations. So for me, I work as an instructional designer. So AI work for me as a thought partner. So my goal for AI in my work is to having some strategic advice or enhance my existing tasks. I don't expect AI to create something for me, rather how it can help me to foster my current work. So that would be my focus. So if we consider the role AI currently playing for me is outliner, it's help me to copywritings or advising how can I enhance those things, and also it works as an editor with me. And what are the skills that I appreciate most? I think the speed and the analytical skill of AI, I really appreciate it. The amount of the time it took to analyze the data, that's one of the great benefit for me. And it also helped me to fostering the critical thinking and give me different kind of thoughts. So that's also another thing I really like it. And another thing is for my role, I really like the way it shows the multiple way of presenting the content. It not only enhance the quality of textual content, but also give me some other way how I can present the content visually, how I can present the content with the multimedia. So those things give me food for thought. But if I saw the other side, the challenge for these things for me is the biasness and sometimes the misrepresentations of the information that AI is still pretending. Sometimes it works perfectly according to my instructions, but after the next prompt, it doesn't work properly. So that's the limitations which where I need to involve on time and time again to understand the response that I'm getting. That's actually the expected response that I am expecting from this AI. So these are the concerns. Still, human intervention is required. And therefore, for my work, I involve AI for low-stake involvement. But where the human involvement is required or high-stake engagement, I prefer to involve myself to check the accuracy of the data, check the input output that I got from AI, whether it is correct or not, and also the biasness that I need to check continuously. So for me, AI is uh, is a partner, is a machine partner who helped me to organize my work properly. But I cannot rely solely on AI. It can help me to enhance my idea, enhance my ability, but my engagement is still relevant with that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ariful.
Yes, I think those are wonderful points, and we've started having some conversations in the chat about other ways that we can use AI really can be a lot of fun as an instructor who often spends a lot of time by yourself creating assignments, creating titles, as you mentioned, creating activities. So I think for a lot of people, especially post COVID, we've spent a lot of time in our homes chatting with some people, but also feeling like we need to revise. I like to use AI as a partner to come up with titles or names with puns. It's wonderful at rewriting, so giving it a section of your syllabus and asking it to change it into a haiku, working with rubrics, providing information, and I walk my students through this process. So if I'm teaching something and I'm asking them to write a response for me, we'll talk about the appropriate uses of AI for the assignment in terms of brainstorming, in terms of helping them think, but that there are things that I'm looking for that need to go beyond just repeating that AI. A lot of the students that I work with really don't like to do a lot of reading. And this, I'm not talking about adaptive technology or wanting to use audio. I'm saying they just feel that a lot of education has become you give me something and then I give it back to you. So that's really the place where we have to start with AI, that it is a wonderful tool, but you can see that it spits out words at a really rapid pace. And if you don't have the time to read those words, then or at least listen to them or engage them in some way, then it may not be as useful for you as you think it is. Because for the assignments for my class, I'm asking you to really interact with all of those words that it's spitting out, which is a pretty significant time commitment. So really to think about that as you're using it. Again, on the high level, I think we all want to save time so that we can use that precious commodity in really more intensive discipline specific ways. And so I think the tools we've talked about today are ones that I've enjoyed using in that way.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Natasha. I really appreciate that you and Ariful talked about the need for human oversight still, that these tools, they provide ideas, they provide scaffolding, but really at the end of the day, there needs to be the human touch, and that perhaps they aren't the time savers sometimes that we think they're going to be, right? Because you really do have to be prepared to not only review the content, but also revise the content as well. And then I just wanted to comment too on one thing that you brought up, Natasha, was this idea of also using it just for a little bit of lightness or joy or fun. I think that's, something that we often talk about, sort of these heavy duty uses of AI, and it's worth pausing too to think about some ways that it might bring some lightness or some fun into our classroom and our instructional strategies as well. Okay, and I think for this one, we'll start you off, Natasha. And I'd love to hear a little bit about which of these roles you've been more resistant to employ for generative AI, and which of these roles would you employ next? So something like maybe something you're hesitant to employ now, and then maybe something you haven't tried, but you want to try out.
So I'm most hesitant in using AI to create feedback for students or specific grading and even filling in a rubric. And it was interesting this week that the New York Times put out an article, which I'll add to the chat, though I do believe it is behind the wall. So if someone can find it not behind the wall, that would be great. But there was a case at Northeastern University where a student actually sued to receive a portion of their tuition back when they discovered significant use of AI by a teacher, not just in grading, but also in creating content for the course. Some of the prompting was left intact. And so I think one of the ethical concerns is when you use AI to be transparent with your students about how and where you are using it in your syllabus or instructional materials. And I know we sort of skipped over the environment, but that's another sort of hidden cost that I think if we're using AI in any of our materials, we should have some indication about the amount of energy that was used with the AI to create that. Because I don't think that's readily apparent to people when they're using AI, that there's a great deal of energy going into the ability for those words just to appear very quickly or those images to be created for you. The other thing I would say about that grading is I know that it can help us, and I don't necessarily think there is a point where we're devaluing our own contributions. But I think this really muddies the water for students. And they also want to have that human connection. So looking through the article, there were some later comments, and I linked to another area that asked students just to respond. What's your initial reaction when you feel as though some of the feedback being provided to you is being generated? I think one professor accidentally left the prompts in that said, hey, ChatGPT, will you please give this student some nice feedback? And the professor insisted I read the paper. I just wanted some of the words to come through. And of course, often what the student receives is, well, I don't think the professor read anything that I wrote. I didn't feel that response. So thinking about that labor. At the same time, I think ChatGPT and other tools are really good at creating rubrics. So perhaps going halfway and saying to the students, I may be using some AI tools to give me help with the tools that I am then going to use, but I promise to give feedback. For my online classes, I have now gone mostly with leaving short audio comments or short video comments to really emphasize that this is coming directly from a person, not a computer voice. And that seems to have bridged that gap. So that's what I've been most resistant to use. And these are ways I'm trying to get past that in order to use it in the future.
I'm just going to add with Natasha about for me, AI, I don't want to use AI for researching things still because the hallucination or misrepresentations of the AI is it's one of the concern for me. So I am still reluctant not to use AI to research or making any decisions thing. And also for in future, how I see how it could be helpful for me, the agentic feature of the AI, if it helps me to and it helps me to do the evaluate my specific task. Maybe the way currently I'm working as an instructional designer to check the alignment. I can in future I see AI will help me to evaluate those alignment, but I will check the finalization. I don't want to depend on AI for any high level or high stakes role, which I think should be done by me. And that's one of the things in future I will probably ask AI or expect it from AI to do those low level stuff where I need to spend lots of time. Rather, I will more focusing on the high level stuff. So that's the envision from the AI in future.
That's great, Ariful. And I think something I'm connecting between what you and Natasha said too is this idea of like when giving feedback or giving suggestions, AI really doesn't know the whole picture. It doesn't know about those conversations you had in the hallway with a student or during office hours, or even, sometimes the comments that they've made in class. And so you really have that relationship with the student. Whereas what relationship does this feedback tool have? Or same thing, Ariful, if you're thinking about making decisions about, for an online class or some instructional materials, was it in there when, when you were talking with the professor and listening to some of their concerns? Does it know about a certain policy that you have at your institution, for example, right? So it's like all this knowledge that you bring to the table that really helps you to make more informed decisions. So you're right. I think that some of these higher stake things are things that we need to sort of have more of that human involvement with. Great. We'll go ahead and move to the next one. So I think the next question that we have is how can we continue to provide personal learning experiences using some of these generative AI tools that are trained on large data sets? So how can we have that human or that personalized touch? And what role does the instructor or instructional designer play in making sure that there's human involvement in learning? I think Natasha and Ariful, you touched on this a little bit. So any other further thoughts you have are welcome.
Okay, we already discussed how AI is helping us. For in terms of instructional design roles, one of the things is how to analyze the data or how to analyze your learner characteristics. So AI helps me to do those analysis with very quick time. but I need to collaborate with AI when I'm asking AI to create the persona. Uh, the way I'm asking to the AI to create those persona, I need to verify those things and understand that's the requirement I'm expecting. And I also when I outline the learning objectives, any blueprint or any course before starting any course design or any consultations, sometimes some of the high level of Bloom's objective might be missing. So I start a partnership approach with AI. How can I enhance those things? What are the missing things? And sometimes AI provide me some feedback which are really vague. So I need to refine those suggestions and make it more humanized for my clients or the instructor. Another things for AI, as you mentioned, Amber, at the beginning, one of the things, sometimes thinking about the strategy is really time consuming. But if I give them those thoughts, these are my target audience and these are the expectation. I want something to collaborative thing. I want something where different learning style will be addressed. So AI could give me idea very quickly about that. Very recently, I was working with an instructor. So there are lots of textual content and also images also added in that course, and they also add some video. But at some point, it seems like some portion of the content is very tech savvy. So we use a notebook LM, then it give us some podcast and it creates only 2 minutes. So that give us a different kind of things where I can show the different way of presenting the content as an instructional designer. But the thing is, I need to check and verify the way it presented the content, whether it is aligned with the learning objectives, whether it present the contents the way your instructor or the course designers want to present those things. But the thing is, at least it can grip the different way of presenting contents, and it was very quickly it create those things. Another things I think from my point of view, when I was consulting with the instructor, how we can engage the learner engagement into their course, or how an instruction teacher presence could be embedded into their course or into any materials. So some of the tools I really find really helpful. Let's say the Contact North and they created the AR Teacher Pro, which allow learner to interact with the contents and reflection with the content in a self-learning process. This might not the perfect introductions, but at least it creates some kind of food for thought, which learner can bring back into their classroom, where instructor or the course author, they can interact with the learner to refine those type of things. So from my point of view, when I'm involved with the AI and refining the content and engaging with the AI meaningfully, then actually humanize the content and make my content more enriched.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ariful. And Natasha, did you have anything that you wanted to add with this one?
I would just add two things. We've talked a lot in the chat about this personalized learning experience for the student to be able to understand something. So using an AI to pick apart something you're supposed to understand and give it back to you over and over again, with you still saying, I don't understand this. I need another example. I need it in this format. I need it for this reading level. Those are things I think we can definitely, tools we can put in a student's toolbox. I think, unfortunately, most of our assignments are built where we're trying to check for understanding. And if the student just gives the assignment to the AI, then that short circuits our ability to know, does the student understand, or are you just telling me what the AI said? In terms of training a generative AI tool with a large data set, there are all kinds of things. And here I think we should really put this in the hands of students. So ask the students to design a chatbot that speaks for a historical figure. Ask the students to design an activity where they can speak to the computer and get a response in class, create class debates with an AI tool that is also a voice in that conversation, but make it clear. I know we've used the word humanize generative AI. I guess I would come from the perspective that we shouldn't humanize the AI. We should keep the AI in AI and say this is its strength, and then allow the human voices to really interact with that voice that we are clearly identifying as generative AI.
Yeah. Tasha, I really like too this idea of having students explore using the tool as, creating their own model or chat bot, for example, and helping them to kind of have that same reflection too on the strengths. What did it do well? Where do I have to kind of jump in and collaborate, so to speak, with the tool? I really like that idea too of sort of peeling back the curtain and having them reflect on that instead of just always just like using the tool and getting the responses, having them try to create something and think about like how successful they are. And then Ariful, another thing that I thought that you brought up that was really great and I wanted to highlight was just also using AI to this idea of like, what am I missing, right? I mean, we're all individuals and we can try to think about everything, but sometimes there's just things that we forget about, right? Too. So I love that idea of just popping your assignment in there, or popping your instructions in there, your outline, and just saying, what things am I missing? What other things could I include? Doesn't mean you have to do that, but it's just sort of like that. It's like asking a friend. It's a lifeline, if you will. Like you can get some ideas to help you make sure your content's comprehensive. I think we'll pause there on the questions for that we've generated, but we'd love to open it up for questions from our audience. And if you want to put questions in chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, and we can have you unmute, either are totally fine with us. And I don't know, Spencer or Purva, if there's questions that came up that haven't been answered that you'd like to post to the group too, those are most welcome as well. And while we're waiting to see what questions you all have, one question that we didn't get to that maybe I can get your 1 or 2 sentence response from Ariful and Natasha is, what advice would you have for somebody who is just starting out, or maybe someone who's feeling a little overwhelmed with just sort of the barrage of tools that are out there?
So I would say you have to take it the way that you do any course redesign or new tool, that you pick one thing that you're going to do and roll it out for one semester, see how it works, and then revise and explore. I think there also, when we talk about AI and we talk about generative AI in sort of this wide blanket, we're talking about the use of a generative AI by an instructor is very different from the use of a generative AI by a student. And so I think these are two separate conversations. Right now, what a lot of faculty seem to be struggling with or responding to is the necessity of changing years of instructional materials to respond to what they're now receiving from students. I know we didn't get to the question about the emerging divide economically, but as we know, these tools weren't created by benevolent educators who wanted them to continue to exist for free. And so when we think about the costs that are attached to them, I think that's an important part of for us as educators to bring into the classroom when students are using these. So yes, I think if you're feeling overwhelmed, pick one AI, hang out with it for about an hour. But when you're doing that, think about the environmental concerns, think about the material that has been fed into a machine to give you all of that work, and then think about how you could create a meaningful response or conversation depending on your discipline with your students around that very, very early in the semester. I find if you want to set the tone for how you'll accept AI, you really have to model it in the classroom and not just assume that telling is going to work better than showing.
I love that.
I just want to add to Natasha, I mean, be bold and experiment. There is nothing wrong with experiment with AI. And the tools has option to create agent or create gem. So try to use those things for your task If you like it, that's fine. If it does not align with ethical alignment or accessibility, you just drop it. So be bold and experiment. It could be another way.
And I think we've got a great question from Natasha. I'll give it as a kind of a rapid fire question. But what are some of the tools that you keep coming back to? You want to just name some of the tools or drop them in chat? I think the audience is very curious to see which ones that you both really like.
One of the tools I'm using for AI Teaching Pro by Contact Not and Contact Not, and they also create another tools for AI Tutor Pro. Those are some self-reflective tools, and these tools are free and built by the educator. So, and they're not using the data for train their AI. So that's one of the reasons I choose those things. But then again, the consideration is you need to make your own judgment. It's not highly dependent on those things, but you can play with those tools also.
Awesome. Can you put up, do you have a link that you could pop to that in chat, Ariful?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
going to do that.
Thank you. And what about you, Natasha? Which ones are your favorites?
I've just started playing with Elicit, and thank you for reminding me of that. I do tend to just go back to ChatGPT and play with it the most. I'm admitting I don't think I've turned on my Copilot. I just am afraid of automated AIs that are constantly in my face. I like to go to the AI, not feel like the AI is peering over my shoulder. But I'm sure as we continue to live into these new partners, we'll get better at that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too about like, what does it mean when these tools sort of just are turned on by default and we have to turn them off versus going out and seeking them out? How will that change our workflow and also the workflow for our students, I think. It's interesting. Other questions that you'd like to ask Natasha and Ariful, looking through chat. Natasha asked, how often during your daily or week workflow do you turn to an AI tool?
I would say around 50% times somehow I'm engaging with that. But I need to be mindful about the authenticity of these things when I'm engaging with the AI tools. So that's also another concern. I also need to check the policy or guideline for my team or my organization, whether I'm aligning with it. Am I going to violate anything? So that's also another time. So I also need to involve with that.
Yeah. And Heather has another good question that I want to bring up too before we close. She asked, have either of you used any for image generation? And is there a tool that you prefer for this?
I have tried 2 image creators. I'm trying to think right now of the second one, but when a ChatGPT added images, I don't have a paid account, and so I will just exhaust my images, free images for the day, and I tend not to get what I want from the free images. So I keep telling it, well, no, change this or change that, and then I have exhausted them. But there is another one that's named after an artist. Someone remind me of that one.
Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Dolly.
Dolly, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
And I think Dolly does, it's gotten much better. I used Dolly when it first came out, and I have a number of creative writer friends who really spent many, many hours with it. And its early bugs were to take whatever you told it not to include and just magnify it by 100. And so you spent a lot of frustrating time saying, don't do that. And the AI saying, oops, I guess I did do that wrong, completely wrong again. It is interesting to me. I have better luck finding AI images, if this makes any sense. So there are evidently people who are very good at prompting, and I'll often use an AI image in a PowerPoint presentation, and inevitably the audience says, I love that image. And so I have, the attribution, but it is amazing to me that the people that really practice this prompting with the images, it does produce images that seem to really captivate humans. And to me, that's another interesting component that I'd like to delve into a little bit more about why that is.
Yeah, very fascinating. And I think they've only started to get better too with time. I've noticed like the latest model with ChatGPT is there's some really cool things that you can generate. I think with that, we'll go ahead and move to the wrap-up slide, Spencer, if that's okay. Before we close, we wanted to let you know about a few upcoming Rebus programs and webinars. The first one is our 6-week supplemental materials development certificate. And this is an online asynchronous certificate with 3 live sessions that are optional. But this is really an opportunity if you're interested in maybe playing more with AI and creating supplemental materials for your course, whether you use an openly licensed textbook or not. You might want to check this out, and registration closes on May 25th. We also have 2 more webinars in this series, which is made possible thanks to some generous funding from the Hewlett Foundation. We're really grateful to be able to offer these. On June 18th, we'll have a session with Brian McGurry, and we'll be talking about making the case for OER beyond just affordability. What are some of the things what are some of the arguments or case studies that we can bring to administrators or other stakeholders to get support for OER initiatives on our campus? And then Mary Isbell will close the sessions off for us with some information on open pedagogy. And then last but not least, if you like this type of professional development, we also offer not only the 6-week course, but we offer a year-long cohort, which Natasha has facilitated and Ariful and Natasha have both gone through, which is called the Open Publishing Project Certificate. It was formerly the Textbook Success Program, but it's an intensive program that runs for a year that really gives you the support, the community, and also the skills to build capacity for open initiatives at your institution. So we'll share the links to the slides again one more time in chat, and we'll hang around with any other questions. And I think it's okay to go ahead and stop the recording here, but thank you so much for spending time with us, and we hope to see you at our next webinar in June.